Before there were nations, before kingdoms rose and fell, before even the first tribe named itself, there was Africa. And buried beneath its ancient soil lies the oldest story humanity has ever known. A story not written in ink or carved in stone, but woven into our very DNA. You see, the story of Black people doesn't begin with slavery. It doesn't start with colonization or the transatlantic trade. It begins tens of thousands of years earlier, at the very root of human history. Modern science now confirms what ancient whispers have always known. Africa is the cradle of all mankind. Every person alive today, whether they live in Tokyo or Texas, can trace their deepest ancestry back to this powerful, sun-kissed continent. But when it comes to understanding the genetic origins of Black people specifically, things get even more fascinating. In this video, we're diving deep into the world of African DNA lineages. We'll introduce you to Mitochondrial Eve, the ancient African mother of every living human. And we'll meet Y-DNA Adam, the paternal root of many Black male lineages. We'll also explore the haplogroups, genetic signatures passed down through generations, that unlock untold stories of African migrations, kingdoms, and hidden diversity. And here's the twist. Some of the truths you're about to hear have been hidden in plain sight. So buckle up. What you're about to discover may just change how you see Africa and how you see yourself forever. Long before cities rose or pyramids touched the skies, something remarkable happened in Africa. The first modern humans, people just like us, walked its soil. This isn't just a belief or a theory. It's a scientific fact backed by fossil and genetic evidence from around the world. Most scientists agree. Africa is the birthplace of Homo sapiens, the species we all belong to. The oldest known human remains were found in places like Omo Kaibish in Ethiopia, dated to about 195,000 years ago, and Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, even older, about 300,000 years. These ancient bones tell us that our earliest ancestors didn't live in Europe or Asia. They lived in Africa. But it wasn't just bones that told the story. Africa's diverse environments, savannas, deserts, forests, created the perfect conditions for human evolution. The continent's climate, resources, and isolation helped shape early humans in ways that gave us the intelligence, adaptability, and resilience we still carry today. And here's the fascinating part. Every human alive today, no matter their race or location, has ancestral roots in Africa. That's right. If you trace your family tree far enough back, it doesn't end in Europe or Asia. It circles back to this continent. For Black people, this isn't just the beginning of human history. It's the heart of identity. Africa isn't just the first chapter. It's the cover, the prologue, and the original setting of the story of us all. Imagine tracing your family line back, not just a few centuries, but thousands of generations. Past grandparents, beyond ancient tribes, to one single woman. Her name? Mitochondrial Eve. Not because she was the first woman ever, but because her mitochondrial DNA is in all of us alive today. Let's break it down simply. Mitochondrial DNA is passed from mothers to their children, but only daughters pass it on. Over time, most women's mitochondrial lines disappear, but one woman's DNA survived. That woman lived about 150,000 to 200,000 years ago, somewhere in East Africa. She's not our only ancestor. But when it comes to the maternal line, the mother-to-daughter genetic chain, hers is the one that made it through history. Think of Mitochondrial Eve as the great-great-great-grandmother of us all. Her DNA quietly traveled through millennia, from huts to empires, from the African plains to every corner of the globe. This is especially meaningful for Black people. Because Mitochondrial Eve lived in Africa, it shows that the Black woman carries one of the oldest surviving genetic legacies on Earth. Science didn't discover her in a royal tomb or a buried treasure. It found her in our cells. And while the name Eve was given by scientists, her true legacy is written in the biological code we all carry. So the next time someone asks where we came from, you can say with confidence, from a powerful woman who walked Africa long before time remembered her name. Now, let's talk about the other half of the story, our paternal ancestry. Just like mitochondrial DNA is passed from mothers to children, there's another type of genetic material passed only from fathers to sons. It's called the Y chromosome. And just like Mitochondrial Eve, Scientists trace this back to a man they call Y chromosome Adam. But don't let the name confuse you. He didn't live at the same time as Eve, and he wasn't the first man ever. What makes him important is this. All living men today share his Y chromosome, passed down from father to son, generation after generation. Y chromosome Adam likely lived in Africa around 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. That makes him one of the oldest fathers in human history, at least when it comes to genetics. Why does this matter? Because for many black men, tracing their Y-DNA leads back to this ancient African root. It connects modern black communities with the original fathers of humanity. Y chromosome studies have revealed something amazing. Certain African Y-DNA haplogroups, like A and B, are among the oldest lineages on Earth. These lineages aren't just ancient, they're uniquely African. They didn't migrate from Europe or Asia. They started in Africa, and many never left. This tells us something powerful. The story of black people doesn't begin with colonization. It begins with creation, with legacy, with fathers and mothers whose DNA shaped the entire world. And the journey is just beginning. Let's take a step deeper into the science. Don't worry, we'll keep it simple. Every person's DNA carries haplogroups, basically, ancient family codes passed down through thousands of generations. Think of them as ancient stamps in your ancestral passport. In Africa, some of the world's oldest and most unique haplogroups are still found today. On the maternal side, passed from mother to child, we have mtDNA haplogroups like L0, L1, L2, and L3. These are the earliest branches on the human family tree. In fact, L0 is believed to be the most ancient, linked to populations like the Khoisan people of southern Africa. Then on the paternal side, passed from father to son, we have Y-DNA haplogroups like A, B, and E1B1A. Haplogroup A is the oldest known Y chromosome lineage, found in some of the most ancient African communities. Haplogroup E1B1A, on the other hand, is widespread among West and Central Africans and African diaspora populations across the Americas due to the transatlantic slave trade. What makes these haplogroups fascinating is that they're not just markers of biology, they tell stories. Stories of survival, migration, isolation, and expansion. They show us how diverse African populations are, even among themselves. So when someone says African, remember, it's not one group. It's many ancient lineages, each carrying pieces of a much larger, richer story written in the bloodline of humanity. Now here's where it gets truly mind-blowing. Scientists believe that around 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, a small group of humans left Africa, and they didn't just wander aimlessly. They populated the entire planet. This is called the out-of-Africa theory, and it's one of the most important discoveries in genetics. Everyone living outside of Africa today, from Scandinavia to South America, descends from those early African travelers. How do we know this? Thanks to a genetic clue called haplogroup L3. This maternal haplogroup branched out from Africa and gave birth to new lineages called M and N, which spread across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. That means all non-African people today carry traces of African ancestry, whether they know it or not. These early migrations happened slowly. People moved in waves, through the Arabian Peninsula, into Asia, and eventually across the globe. They adapted to cold, to heat, to mountains and coasts, but they all came from the same starting point, Africa. So when you hear that Africa is the birthplace of humanity, it's not just about fossils. It's written in the genes of every person walking the earth. Black people carry the original codes, the root DNA. But the truth is, we're all branches of that same ancestral tree. Some of us just stayed closer to the roots. Here's a surprising fact. Two people from opposite ends of Africa can be more genetically different from each other than a European and an Asian. Think about that for a second. Why? Because Africa has the highest level of genetic diversity on Earth. It's where humanity began and where humans have lived the longest, which means African DNA has had more time to evolve, adapt, and diversify. This isn't just trivia, it's incredibly important. That diversity means African genomes hold unique clues about diseases, immunity, and human health. Studying African DNA could help scientists find cures for illnesses that affect all people, not just Africans. It also helps people reconnect with lost histories. For Black people in the diaspora, descendants of enslaved Africans. DNA testing can point toward specific ethnic groups, regions, and even migration paths. What was once erased by slavery is being rediscovered through science. Sadly, African populations have often been underrepresented in genetic research. But that's changing. More African scientists and global researchers are now focusing on Africa, not just to trace the past, but to shape the future of medicine and human knowledge. So the next time someone tells you genetics is boring, remind them, inside African DNA is not just the past. It's the key to understanding the future of all humankind. Let's clear something up. Black people are not a monolith. They don't come from just one place, one tribe, or one story. In fact, Black ancestry is incredibly diverse, genetically, culturally, and historically. Across Africa alone, there are over 3,000 ethnic groups and more than 2,000 languages. Genetically, Africans belong to a wide range of lineages that are more varied than anywhere else in the world. Even within the same country, like Nigeria or Ethiopia, you'll find populations with completely different DNA signatures. But colonization and slavery tried to erase that complexity. During the transatlantic slave trade, people were taken from many regions and lumped together without regard for tribe or family. Names were changed, languages lost, traditions buried. But here's the beautiful part. DNA is helping bring it all back. Today, many African Americans are discovering their roots through genetic testing. Some are tracing their ancestry back to groups like the Yoruba, Mandinka, Igbo, and Akan. These aren't just names. They're links to real cultures, real histories, real identities. It's a form of healing, a quiet revolution of reconnection. So if you've ever wondered where your ancestors came from, or felt that something was missing in the story, you're not alone. The tools now exist to fill in those blanks and reclaim what was stolen. Let's pause for a moment and take this in. If you're Black, your ancestors weren't just part of history. They were the beginning of it. They weren't lost, primitive, or forgotten. They were innovators, travelers, survivors. The first to speak, to create, to imagine. There's something powerful, almost spiritual, about knowing that your bloodline helped shape all of humanity. It gives depth to your identity and pride to your name. This isn't about superiority. It's about understanding your true legacy. And today, genetics gives us something we've never had before, a bridge. A way to look beyond what history books skipped and slavery records erased. It's helping millions of people, especially Black people in the diaspora, reconnect with their heritage in a way that's personal and empowering. You don't need a PhD to explore your past. You can start with a simple DNA test, or just by learning about your ancestors' regions, cultures, and traditions. Every step you take is a step closer to knowing who you are and where you come from. And in a world that often tells us to forget, remembering is a radical act. So now you know. The story of Black people didn't start with slavery. It didn't begin with chains or ships or colonization. It began in Africa, where the first humans walked, talked, loved, and built. It began with mitochondrial Eve and Y-DNA Adam, with ancient haplogroups and great migrations, with kingdoms that rose and fell long before Europe ever wrote a single word of history. The story of Black people is the first story ever told, and it still matters today. Because to understand the world, you must first understand Africa. If this journey opened your eyes, imagine what's still waiting to be discovered. Hit that subscribe button, leave a comment about what part surprised you the most, and share this with someone who needs to hear the truth about their roots. This isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning.